I think it doesn't come as a surprise that sometimes we don't know how to express something, can't find the words. And then, of course, I'm referring to a language that we understand because, you can only communicate as a human being properly when you know the language. So that is already a tremendous restriction that if somebody doesn't speak English, communication is not all that clear and we can't express what we want to express. So we all have gone through that kind of frustration. But there is a completely different type of challenge, let's call it that way, that when you talk to somebody that you feel that the person doesn't understand you. And sometimes that comes because we simply have different reference systems. So even certain words are not necessarily meaning 100% the same thing for each person. And that can easily lead to misunderstandings, can trigger people. On top of that, many words can have a certain, you can say, charge, an emotional charge, even. So words have energy, but they often are nonetheless, let's say, limit us into what we want to express. And that is to some degree frustrating. And it becomes even more frustrating when we go into metaphysical subjects, when we go and talk about subjects that are not measurable, subtle energy, subtle beings. Not only because people don't always believe they exist, but even when they believe it, they may have different concepts because it becomes even more difficult then to describe. One of the things that I've noticed that the more I connect through the studies of metaphysical ecology with beings that are not visible or beings that are coming from a different consciousness level and even do not use words, then we really feel how limited words actually are. I notice that often they send something to me and I cannot translate it into something that I can then explain to somebody else. It is as if the words that we use are literally developed for description things in our physical world. And the more we connect also with the metaphysical world, the invisible world, communicating with beings of other consciousness, the more we run into that problem of what I call limitations of language. So actually, what we begin to understand is we may never fully understand other beings, especially invisible beings, if we are continue to restrict ourselves to a spoken language. And again, I'm not talking about the fact that not everyone is speaking the same language. I'm talking about the fact that language in and of itself is insufficient. And that is quite a realization. And that brings up then to the question, now what? Well, that now what comes down to when you communicate with other beings is learning to go beyond the words. And then we talk about telepathic or telempathic communication. So at least that we then understand each other. Okay, then still the question is, how can we then translate that into something that I can then share with other people who do not have that type of connection? So for the time being, we have to accept that we are basically communicating in a rather limiting way, learning to be okay with that. But at the same time, being willing to expand and train our ability to communicate beyond the spoken words. The moment that I connect with another being from a different level of consciousness, and for a moment I'm really able to not to translate it, but just connect and then get this impression. That impression is often not, let's say, fully describable in words. And I'm beginning to learn that it's good not to try to do that. Just have that experience. And then be okay that when I try to communicate about it, that I cannot fully express what happened or what the message was, because there are no words for it. We even have that when we try to express an emotional situation. Often we say it's beyond words. Well, the more you go to, let's say, other frequencies, invisible beings, higher consciousness, of course, that will happen more and more and more. But at the same time, I've learned that it is possible to find, let's say, new expressions. It's like building new reference systems so that at a certain moment, at least some of it in a new way, with sometimes even new words or new descriptions, can still be communicated in words. So for the time being, I think we are stuck to that. And yeah, I have to confess that sometimes it's a bit frustrating. And most of the time, I'm okay with it. But it is exciting to begin to be able to connect with beings beyond words, even though to share we need words. This is what I'm excited about. Accepting the limitations currently, but never giving up in expanding and expanding first the reference system and then maybe communicating in a different way. I'm looking forward to that moment where we don't need words anymore. I think then we understand each other way better. We don't have to fight about meaning because we find the purity of the energy of what you try to convey. Yes, we have still a way to go, but it is good to be aware of the limitations and train yourself to overcome them as much as is possible. I hope that this sharing is stimulating you to look beyond the words.